The morning started like any other on the orbital station horizon. Daniel Price sat at his communication desk, drinking his third cup of coffee and watching the endless stream of data from humanity's 17 colony worlds. He had worked this job for 6 years, and nothing exciting ever happened. Colony ships reported safe arrivals. Mining stations sent production numbers. Agricultural worlds updated their harvest schedules. It was boring work, but Daniel liked boring. Boring meant everyone was safe. Then the screen flickered. A distress signal came through from New Cascadia, humanity's largest farming colony. The message was broken and full of static, but Daniel could hear screaming in the background. A woman's voice shouted coordinates and begged for help. Then something that sounded like an explosion. Then silence. Daniel's coffee cup slipped from his fingers and shattered on the floor. He tried to re-establish contact, but there was nothing. Just empty static, where 400 million human voices should have been. Within the hour, more signals came. Meridian Prime went dark. Avalon 3 stopped responding. The mining outpost on Kepler 7 sent a final transmission that was just one word repeated over and over: run. Admiral Catherine Cole was in her garden when she received the emergency call. She was 63 years old, with gray hair and tired eyes that had seen too many battles. She had served humanity for 40 years and had planned to retire next spring. Those plans died the moment she heard the news. She flew to Geneva within 4 hours and walked into a room full of terrified politicians and military officers. Fleet Commander Samuel Grant met her at the door. His face was pale and his hands were shaking. "How bad?" Catherine asked.
"All of them,"
Samuel said. "Every colony, every station, every ship outside the solar system, gone." Catherine felt her heart stop for a moment. She had friends on those colonies. Former crew members, a niece who had moved to New Cascadia to become a teacher. Survivors. She asked. Samuel shook his head. The emergency council lasted 18 hours. Intelligence analyst Lisa Monroe presented what little information they had gathered. The attackers called themselves the Galactic Hegemony. They were an alliance of alien species that had controlled this region of space for thousands of years. Humanity's expansion into the stars had apparently violated their territory. Their response was genocide. The attacks had been coordinated and precise. The hegemony ships appeared without warning, destroyed all defensive platforms, and then bombarded the colonies from orbit until nothing remained but ash and glass. The entire operation had taken less than 6 hours. Lisa showed satellite images of New Cascadia before and after. The first image showed green fields, blue oceans, and the lights of 100 cities. The second image showed a scorched ball of rock, still glowing red from the bombardment. Several council members vomited. Others wept openly. One general simply stared at the screen with empty eyes, unable to process what he was seeing. The final death count was 4.2 billion human beings. Men, women, and children. Farmers and scientists, artists and engineers, teachers and doctors. All of them gone in a single day. Some council members argued for surrender. They said humanity could not fight an enemy this powerful. They begged for diplomacy, for negotiation, for any path that did not lead to more death. Others demanded immediate retaliation. They wanted to launch every nuclear weapon Earth possessed at the first alien target they could find. They screamed for blood and vengeance. Admiral Cole listened to both sides in silence. When everyone had finished shouting, she stood up and walked to the front of the room. "I have served in 4 wars," she said. "I have buried friends and enemies alike. I have seen the worst that human beings can do to each other. But I have never seen anything like this." She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of every person present. They did not attack our military. They did not destroy our weapons or our ships. They murdered our families. They burned our children alive. They turned our colonies into mass graves. And they did it because they believed we were too weak to stop them. Catherine's voice grew harder with every word. "Surrender will not save us. These creatures do not want our submission. They want our extinction. If we bow our heads, they will simply cut them off more easily." She turned to the screen, still showing the ruined surface of New Cascadia. But neither can we attack blindly. Rage without purpose is just another form of suicide. We must be smart. We must be patient. We must become something humanity has never been before. Catherine faced the council one final time. They believe they have ended us. They have only awakened us. From this day forward, every factory on Earth will build weapons. Every laboratory will develop new technology. Every school will train soldiers. We will not rest until the hegemony understands the price of human blood. She paused. And that price is their complete and total destruction. The vote was unanimous. Earth declared war on the galactic hegemony. In the days that followed, the world transformed. Factories that had made cars began producing tanks and fighters. Universities redirected all research toward military applications. Young men and women lined up at recruiting stations by the millions, eager to avenge their fallen brothers and sisters. Daniel Price volunteered for the Navy the day after the attacks. His supervisor tried to convince him to stay, saying his skills were more valuable at Horizon Station. Daniel refused. "My cousin lived on Meridian Prime," he said. "She had 2 kids, twins. They were 4 years old." He did not need to say anything else. Across the planet, similar scenes played out. Humanity had always been divided by nations, religions, and ideologies. The hegemony's attack erased those divisions in an instant. For the first time in history, every human being on Earth shared a single purpose. 3 months after the massacre, the first new warship rolled off the production line. Catherine Cole stood on the observation deck as the massive vessel emerged from the orbital shipyard. It was painted black, with red stripes running along its hull. "What will you name it?" Samuel Grant asked. Catherine thought about her niece. About the students she would never teach. About the life that had been stolen from her. "Vengeance," she said. "Somewhere in the darkness between stars." The hegemony celebrated their victory over the primitive humans. They had crushed countless species before. This one would be no different. They could not have been more wrong. The war that would decide the fate of the galaxy had begun, and humanity intended to win it no matter the cost. 6 months after the colonial massacre, Earth had become a world of fire and steel. Every city hummed with the sound of factories working day and night. Every port launched new ships toward the orbital construction yards. Every child grew up hearing stories of what the aliens had done and what humanity would do in return. Dr. Nathan Hughes had not slept in 3 days. He stood in his laboratory at MIT, surrounded by pieces of alien technology that his team had pulled from a crashed hegemony scout ship. The vessel had gone down in the Pacific Ocean during the initial attacks, and recovery teams had worked for weeks to bring its remains to the surface. Nathan was a thin man with messy brown hair and glasses that always seemed to be falling off his face. Before the war, he had studied theoretical physics. He had written papers about faster-than-light travel that his colleagues considered science fiction. Now those theories were the only hope humanity had. His assistant, Caroline Webb, walked into the laboratory carrying 2 cups of coffee. She was younger than Nathan, with short red hair and sharp green eyes that never seemed to miss anything. She had been his student before the war, and she had refused to leave when the military took over his research. "Any progress?" she asked, handing him a cup. Nathan pointed at a strange device on his workbench. It was about the size of a basketball, covered in symbols that no human could read. When active, it glowed with a soft blue light. "I think this is their jump drive," he said, "or at least part of it. The energy readings are unlike anything I have ever seen." Carolyn studied the device carefully. She picked up a scanner and moved it slowly around the alien object, recording data that would take weeks to analyze. "The power requirements are insane," she said. "How do they generate enough energy to fold space like that?" Nathan shook his head. "I do not know yet, but we need to figure it out. Without faster-than-light capability, we cannot reach hegemony territory. We would be stuck in our own solar system, waiting for them to come finish us off." They worked through the night and into the next morning. Other scientists came and went, offering suggestions and sharing discoveries from their own teams. The laboratory became a place where brilliant minds gathered to solve the impossible. On the fourth day, Caroline made the breakthrough. She had been running simulations on her computer. She noticed something strange about the energy patterns. The alien drive did not generate power on its own. Instead, it drew energy from the fabric of space itself, using a process that human physics had never considered possible. "Nathan," she called out, "I think I found it." Within a week, they had built a working prototype. Within a month, human engineers had adapted the technology for use in their warships. For the first time, humanity could travel faster than light. While Nathan and Caroline worked on propulsion, General Patricia Dunn oversaw the construction of humanity's new fleet. She was a tall woman with broad shoulders and a voice that could make soldiers snap to attention from across a room. She had spent her career fighting small wars on Earth. Now she was building an armada to conquer the stars. The Luna shipyards orbited high above the moon's surface. Massive structures of metal and glass that stretched for kilometers in every direction. Thousands of workers lived and worked in these stations. Assembling the ships that would carry humanity's fury to the enemy, Patricia walked through the main construction bay, watching sparks fly as welders fused armor plates to the hull of the newest Vengeance-class battleship. These ships were monsters, each one capable of destroying an entire enemy fleet. They carried weapons that Nathan's team had designed based on salvaged alien technology, along with missiles, railguns, and enough nuclear warheads to glass a planet. "How many ships can we produce per month?" Patricia asked her aide. 12 battleships, 30 cruisers, and about 50 smaller vessels, the young officer replied. "We could increase production if we had more workers." Patricia nodded. "Draft more from the civilian sectors. Farmers can learn to weld. Accountants can learn to manage supply lines. This is total war. Everyone contributes." On Mars, Colonel Eric Palmer trained the soldiers who would fight the hegemony face to face. He had chosen the Red Planet because its harsh environment forced his recruits to adapt quickly. If they could survive Mars, they could survive anything. Eric was a quiet man who rarely raised his voice. He did not need to. His soldiers respected him because he trained alongside them, enduring the same hardships and pushing himself just as hard. He had lost his son on Avalon 3 and had channeled his grief into a single-minded focus on preparing the next generation of warriors. His training camp sat in a valley, surrounded by red mountains. The thin atmosphere made every breath a struggle. The temperature dropped below freezing at night. Equipment failed constantly in the dust and cold. "This is nothing," Eric told his recruits during their first week. "The hegemony worlds will be worse. You will fight in places where the air is poison. You will fight in places where the gravity will crush your bones. You will fight in places so dark you cannot see your own hand. And you will win, because losing is not an option." The recruits who survived his training became the Colonial Marines, the deadliest soldiers humanity had ever produced. They learned to fight in any condition, with any weapon, against any enemy. They learned to ignore pain, fear, and exhaustion. They learned that their own lives meant nothing compared to the mission. 18 months after the massacre, the hegemony sent a message through a captured communication relay. Their ambassador was a creature that looked like a cross between a spider and a snake, with too many eyes and a voice that made human ears hurt. "We have observed your preparations," the ambassador said. "They are impressive for such a primitive species, but they are ultimately meaningless. The hegemony has conquered 1,000 worlds. You are merely the latest in a long line of failures who believed they could resist us." Admiral Catherine Cole watched the message in her command center. When it finished, she turned to her officers. "Prepare the fleet," she said. "It is time to teach them what humans are capable of." The first wave of human warships departed the solar system 3 days later. They carried weapons that did not exist a year ago. They carried soldiers who had been farmers and teachers and students before the war. They carried the hopes and rage of 8 billion people who had watched their colonies. The hegemony had made a terrible mistake. They had assumed that killing billions of humans would break the survivors. Instead, it had united them. Instead, it had transformed them into something the galaxy had never seen before, a species that would not stop until its enemies were dust. The human fleet. emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Arcturus system. 47 warships hung in the darkness of space, their weapons powered up, and their crews ready for battle. This was Operation Thunderstrike, the first major offensive of the Alien Extermination War. Captain Matthew Lane stood on the bridge of the assault carrier Retribution, watching the tactical display fill with enemy contacts. The hegemony had established a staging ground on Arcturus 4, using it as a base to launch raids into human territory. Intelligence estimated at least 60 alien warships were present, along with dozens of support vessels and orbital defense platforms. Matthew was 34 years old. With dark skin and a calm demeanor that his crew found reassuring, he had been a cargo ship pilot before the war, running supplies between Earth and the colonies. His wife and daughter had lived on Meridian Prime. Now he commanded one of humanity's most powerful warships. "Report," he said quietly. His executive officer, Commander Rachel Torres, checked her console. She was a small woman with sharp features and a voice that carried across any room. She had served in the old Earth Navy and had adapted quickly to the new realities of interstellar combat. 63 enemy warships confirmed, she said. 24 cruiser class, 31 destroyer class, 8 battleship class. Defense platforms are concentrated around the 4th planet. They have not detected us yet, Matthew nodded. The human fleet had emerged far enough from the enemy position to avoid immediate detection. They had a few hours to prepare before the battle began. "Signal all ships," he said. "Execute attack pattern Omega. Carriers hold back and provide fighter support. Battleships target the enemy heavies. Cruisers and destroyers sweep the flanks. No mercy. No retreat." The fleet moved forward like a pack of wolves closing in on prey. The hegemony detected them 2 hours later. Alarm signals spread through their formation as 63 alien warships scrambled to respond. They had expected to face primitive humans armed with nuclear weapons and chemical rockets. Instead, they faced a fleet equipped with technology that matched their own. The Battle of Arcturus 4 began at 0347 hours. Earth Standard Time. Human fighters launched from the carriers in waves, each one piloted by men and women who had volunteered for near-certain death. They knew the statistics. Fighter pilots in this war had a life expectancy measured in minutes. They flew anyway. Lieutenant Kevin Park led the first attack wave against the enemy defense platforms. He was 22 years old, a former engineering student who had learned to fly in 6 months of intensive training. His fighter was fast and deadly, armed with missiles and beam weapons that could cut through alien armor. "All wings follow me in," Kevin said over the radio. "Target the power cores. 1 pass, then break and reform." The fighters dove toward the platforms, dodging enemy fire and launching missiles at close range. Kevin watched 3 of his wingmen explode in balls of flame. He did not have time to mourn. He lined up his shot, fired, pulled away as the platform erupted behind him. Across the battlefield, the larger ships engaged in brutal combat. The Retribution traded fire with a hegemony battleship twice its size, both vessels pounding each other with everything they had. Armor melted. Compartments decompressed. Crew members died at their stations. Matthew stood at the center of the chaos, issuing orders with a calm voice that seemed impossible under the circumstances. He had learned early in his command that panic was contagious. If he stayed calm, his crew stayed calm. If his crew stayed calm, they fought better. "Bring us around to bearing 315, he said. "Concentrate fire on their engine section. If we can cripple their mobility, the destroyers can finish them off." The Retribution turned, its massive engines straining against the forces of combat maneuvering. The ship's main batteries fired in sequence, each shot carrying enough energy to level a city. The enemy battleship's shields flickered and failed. A moment later, its engines exploded, but the hegemony was not finished. They fought with desperation, knowing that defeat here would open the path to their core territories. Their weapons tore through human ships, killing thousands of sailors and marines. The cruiser Dawns Light was hit by a concentrated barrage that killed half its crew in seconds. Its Captain Commander Lisa Park, Kevin's older sister, ordered the survivors to abandon ship. Then she turned the dying vessel toward the nearest enemy cruiser and accelerated to maximum speed. The impact destroyed both ships. On the Retribution, Rachel Torres coordinated the boarding operations. Human Marines in powered armor launched themselves at enemy vessels, cutting through hulls and fighting room by room through alien corridors. These close-quarters battles were brutal and personal. It's nothing like the distant exchanges of the space combat. Sergeant Amy Crawford led her squad into a hegemony command ship. She was a farm girl from Kansas who had never held a weapon before the war. Now she was one of the deadliest soldiers in the colonial Marines. "Stay tight," she told her people. "Watch the corners. These things are fast." The aliens they fought were varied in appearance, some insectoid, some reptilian, some things that had no Earth equivalent. They were all dangerous. They were all determined to stop the human advance. Amy lost 14 Marines in the first 10 minutes. She pushed forward anyway, fighting through corridors filled with smoke and bodies. Her rifle ran dry, and she switched to her pistol. Her pistol ran dry. She drew her knife. The hegemony had never encountered an enemy willing to fight hand-to-hand when technology failed. They never seen creatures who would rather die than retreat. They learned that day Amy reached the reactor core with 6 Marines remaining. They planted explosives on the main power conduits and fought their way back to the extraction point. Behind them, the ship tore itself apart. The battle lasted 19 hours. When it was over, 31 hegemony ships had been destroyed. 16 human ships were lost, along with 4,000 crew members and Marines. The defense platforms were rubble. The staging ground was gone. Matthew Lane stood on his damaged bridge, surrounded by exhausted officers and the smell of smoke and blood. The tactical displays showed the remaining enemy ships fleeing toward deeper hegemony territory. "Do we pursue?" Rachel asked. Matthew shook his head. "Let them go. Let them tell their masters what happened here. Let them explain that humans are coming and nothing will stop us." News of the victory reached Earth 3 days later. For the first time since the massacre, people celebrated in the streets. They shouted and cried and held each other, finally allowing themselves to believe that revenge was possible. Admiral Catherine Cole watched the celebration from her office in Geneva. She allowed herself a small smile, then turned back to the planning table. This was only the beginning. The road to the hegemony homeworld was long and bloody, but humanity had taken the first step, and they would not stop until the journey was complete. The aliens had awakened something in humanity that they did not understand, and now they would pay the price. 7 years of war had transformed both humanity and the galaxy. What began as a desperate fight for survival had become a relentless campaign of conquest that showed no signs of stopping. The hegemony, once the undisputed masters of 1,000 star systems, now faced an enemy that refused to negotiate, refused to retreat, and refused to show mercy. Admiral Catherine Cole had grown old during the war. Her hair was completely white now, and her face carried lines that had not been there before. But her eyes remained sharp, and her will remained unbroken. She commanded all human forces from the bridge of the flagship Humanity's Vengeance. Directing operations across a dozen star systems, the war had entered a new phase. Human forces no longer fought defensive battles or limited offensives. They pushed deep into hegemony territory, capturing worlds and destroying everything that resisted. The strategy was simple and brutal. Advance until the enemy surrendered or died. Lieutenant Commander Stephen Bell had become famous throughout the fleet for his unconventional tactics. He commanded the destroyer Silent Fury, a fast and deadly ship that specialized in ambush attacks. His crew called themselves the Ghost Hunters because they appeared without warning, struck hard, and vanished before the enemy could respond. Stephen was a thin man with a long face, eyes that always seemed to be calculating something. Before the war, he had been a chess champion. Now he applied the same strategic thinking to combat, always thinking 3 moves ahead of his opponents. His current hunting ground was the Vega system, a major supply route for hegemony forces. He had positioned his ship inside an asteroid field using the rocks and debris to mask his presence from enemy sensors. Contact, his sensor officer reported. Convoy approaching. 12 transport ships, 4 escort vessels. Stephen studied the tactical display carefully. The escorts were light cruisers, dangerous but not overwhelming. The transports were carrying supplies and reinforcements to the front lines. Destroying them would cripple hegemony operations in 3 neighboring systems. Wait until they enter the field, he ordered. Then hit the escorts first. Once they are down, the transports cannot escape. The convoy moved slowly into the asteroid field, navigating carefully through the floating rocks. They had no idea that death was waiting for them. Stephen gave the signal, and the silent fury struck. Missiles launched from hidden positions, catching the escorts by surprise. 2 cruisers exploded before they could even raise shields. The other 2 turned to face the threat. But Stephen had already moved his ship behind a massive asteroid. The battle lasted 20 minutes. The silent fury danced through the asteroid field, using the terrain to avoid enemy fire while delivering precise strikes against the remaining escorts. When the last cruiser fell, Stephen turned his attention to the transports. They are surrendering, his communications officer said. Stephen considered the situation. Taking prisoners would slow his operations and put his crew at risk. But destroying unarmed vessels felt wrong, even after everything the hegemony had done. Accept their surrender, he said finally. Transfer their crews to escape pods and destroy the ships. The supplies do not reach the front lines. The crews can explain to their commanders what happened. By the time the Silent Fury left the Vega system, she had destroyed 63 enemy vessels over 4 months of operations. Stephen Bell became a legend. His tactics were taught at every military academy on Earth. While the Space War continued, ground forces fought equally brutal campaigns on captured hegemony worlds. Major Diana Ross led the liberation of the third moon of Hegemony Prime, a place where thousands of beings from conquered species labored as slaves. Diana was a short woman with muscles, built from years of combat training and a scar that ran across her left cheek. She had earned that scar fighting hand-to-hand against a hegemony officer during the early campaigns. She wore it proudly. The moon was covered with factories and mining facilities, all operated by slaves who had been captured during the hegemony's many wars of conquest. These beings came from dozens of different species, some humanoid, some completely alien. They all shared one thing: hatred of their masters. Diana's forces landed at dawn, local time. The assault was swift and overwhelming. Designed to neutralize hegemony defenders before they could harm the slave populations, within 6 hours, the major settlements were under human control. What Diana found shocked even her hardened Marines. The slaves had been worked to death in conditions that defied description. Their bodies were marked with signs of torture and experimentation. Many had been implanted with devices that caused pain if they'd stopped working. Children were separated from parents and used as hostages to ensure compliance. "Get the medical teams down here," Diana ordered, her voice tight with controlled rage. "Everyone who can be saved will be saved. Everyone who did this will answer for it." The liberated slaves proved to be valuable allies. They provided intelligence about hegemony defenses, weak points, and secrets that human spies had never discovered. Many volunteered to fight alongside their liberators. Eager to strike back against their former masters, an alien named Carvath, a reptilian being who had spent 20 years as a slave, became one of Diana's most trusted advisors. He knew the hegemony better than any human, having served in their military before his own people were conquered. "They're not invincible," Carvath told Diana. "They've ruled through fear for so long that they have forgotten how to fight against true resistance. Your species frightens them because you do not respond to fear the way others have." Diana nodded. "They made a mistake when they attacked us. They thought killing billions would break our spirit. Instead, it gave us a reason to fight that will never fade." Back on Earth, Dr. Nathan Hughes worked on a project that would change the course of the war. The Prometheus device was a weapon of unimaginable power, capable of destabilizing a star and causing it to explode. A single deployment could destroy an entire solar system. The ethical debates were fierce. Many argued that using such a weapon would make humanity no better than the hegemony. Others pointed out that the enemy had already proven their willingness to commit genocide. Fighting with one hand tied behind their back would only lead to more human deaths. Admiral Cole made the final decision. "Build it," she ordered. "We may never use it, but the hegemony must know that we can. Sometimes the threat of destruction is enough to prevent the need for it." The weapon was completed in the 6th year of the war. Its existence was leaked to the hegemony through carefully controlled channels. The effect was immediate. The hegemony sued for peace 3 times during the war. The first time, they offered to return all conquered human territory and pay reparations. Admiral Cole refused. The second time, they offered to dissolve their alliance and allow humanity to deal with each member species individually. Admiral Cole refused. The third time, they begged for mercy, promising anything humanity wanted if only the advance would stop. Admiral Cole's response was the same as always: unconditional surrender or extinction. There is no third option. The hegemony chose to fight on, hoping that something would change, that humanity would grow tired or divided or weak. They did not understand that the fire driving humanity forward could never be extinguished. In the 7th year of the war, human forces gathered for the final campaign. 400 warships assembled at the edge of hegemony core territory. The largest fleet in human history, Admiral Cole addressed her commanders from the bridge of humanity's vengeance. "We have fought for 7 years," she said. "We have lost millions of our brothers and sisters. We have sacrificed everything that we were to become what we needed to be. Now, we finish what they started. We end this war on their homeworld, and we make sure that no species ever threatens humanity again." The fleet jumped to faster than light speed, heading for Throne, the heart of the hegemony. Why? The final battle was about to begin. The human fleet emerged from faster than light travel above Throne, the homeworld of the galactic hegemony. 412 warships darkened the sky, their weapons charged and their crews ready for the final battle. After 7 years of blood and sacrifice, humanity had reached the heart of their enemy's empire. Admiral Catherine Cole stood on the bridge of humanity's vengeance. Looking down at the blue and green planet below, Throne was beautiful, covered with vast oceans and sprawling cities that sparkled in the light of its yellow sun. Billions of beings lived on that world, the same beings who had ordered the destruction of human colonies. "Open a channel to the planet," she said. "All frequencies." Her communications officer nodded, and a moment later, Catherine's voice echoed across the entire hegemony homeworld. "This is Admiral Catherine Cole of the United Earth Defense Fleet. You sought to exterminate us. You murdered our children. You burned our homes. Now we have come to collect what is owed. Your fleet is destroyed. Your defenses are falling. You have 1 hour to surrender unconditionally, or we will reduce your world to ash." The hegemony's response came within minutes. They would not surrender. They would fight to the last ship, the last soldier, the last breath. Their pride would not allow anything else. Catherine had expected this. She gave the order to attack. The battle for Throne lasted 3 days. Admiral Matthew Lane, now commanding his own fleet group, led the orbital assault. His ships engaged the remaining hegemony defenders in a desperate battle that lit up the sky above the planet. The enemy fought with the courage of those who knew they had nothing left to lose, but it was not enough. Human technology and human determination proved superior. Matthew watched from his bridge as an enemy. Warships exploded one by one. He felt no joy, only a grim satisfaction that the end was finally near. His wife and daughter had died on Meridian Prime 7 years ago. Soon their deaths would be avenged. "Enemy flagship is breaking formation," his tactical officer reported. "They are trying to ram us." Matthew gave orders to evade, but the hegemony vessel changed course to pursue. It was a massive ship, 3 times the size of anything in the human fleet, and its captain clearly intended to take Matthew with him into death. "All batteries. Concentrate fire on their engines," Matthew ordered. "Stop them before they reach us." The Retribution and her escorts opened fire with everything they had. Beams of energy and salvos of missiles tore into the enemy flagship, shredding its armor and penetrating its hull. But the ship kept coming, driven by engines that refused to die. At the last moment, human destroyer threw itself into the path of the collision. The two ships hit each other at tremendous speed, creating an explosion that temporarily blinded sensors across the fleet. When the light faded, both vessels were gone. Matthew bowed his head for a moment, honoring the sacrifice of the destroyer's crew. Then he returned to the battle. There would be time to mourn later. On the surface of Throne, General Patricia Dunn commanded the ground invasion. Dropships descended through the atmosphere under heavy fire, carrying thousands of Marines to landing zones around the capital city. Many ships were shot down before they could reach the ground. The survivors landed in chaos, immediately engaging enemy forces that had fortified every building and street. Colonel Eric Palmer, the man who had trained the first colonial Marines on Mars, led the assault on the Hegemony High Council chambers. He was 60 years old now, too old for frontline combat by any reasonable standard. He did not care. He had started this war mourning his son. He intended to finish it personally. His forces fought through the outer defenses, taking heavy casualties as they advanced. The Hegemony threw everything they had at the humans. Waves of soldiers and war machines and desperate civilians who had been given weapons and told to fight or die. Eric lost count of how many enemies he killed. His rifle grew hot in his hands. His armor was scarred by dozens of near misses. 3 times, soldiers next to him fell dead, cut down by enemy fire. 3 times, he kept moving forward. The council chambers were located in a massive building at the center of the capital, structure of glass and metal that had stood for thousands of years. It was here that the Hegemony had ruled their empire. It was here that the decision to exterminate humanity had been made. Eric's forces breached the main entrance and fought their way inside, room by room, floor by floor. The resistance was fierce, but futile. These were politicians and administrators, not warriors. They did not know how to fight against soldiers who had been forged in 7 years of total war. The High Council itself was found in their meeting chamber, surrounded by guards who died trying to protect them. 12 beings of various species, each one responsible for the deaths of billions of humans. They looked at Eric with a mixture of fear and defiance. "Cannot do this," one of them said, a creature that resembled a tall insect with multiple arms. "We are the rulers of 1,000 worlds. You are nothing but primitives who got lucky." Eric raised his rifle. "You killed my son. You killed 4 billion of my people. You tried to wipe us from existence." He lowered the weapon. "But we are not you. We do not murder helpless prisoners, no matter how much they deserve it. You will stand trial for your crimes. The galaxy will know what you did and what you are." The council members were taken into custody and transported to the fleet. They would face justice, not vengeance. Humanity had fought as monsters when necessary, but they would not become monsters in victory. The battle ended on the 3rd day. The last Hegemony warship was destroyed in orbit. The last ground forces surrendered or were killed. The capital city fell silent, streets filled with the debris of war and the bodies of those who had refused to yield. Admiral Bailove, Cole landed on Throne that evening, walking through the ruined streets with an escort of Marines. She was 70 years old, exhausted by years of command. But she refused to miss this moment. A plaza in front of the council building had been cleared for the ceremony. Human soldiers stood in formation, their armor battered, but their posture proud. Above them, the flags of Earth and all the lost colonies flew in the alien wind. Catherine stepped onto a platform that had been hastily constructed from debris. She looked out at her soldiers, at the ruined city, at the sky where human warships still circled. "We have one," she said simply. "The Hegemony is defeated. Their empire is dissolved. The species they conquered are free. The threat to humanity is ended." She paused, thinking of all those who had not lived to see this day. Daniel Price, killed in the early battles. Caroline Webb, lost when her research station was destroyed. Stephen Bell, whose ship had vanished during a raid 2 years ago. Millions of others whose names would fill books. Have paid a terrible price for this victory. We have lost people we loved. We have done things that will haunt us forever. We have become something that our ancestors would not recognize. Her voice grew stronger. But we survived. We fought back against those who sought to destroy us, and we won. Let the galaxy remember this day. Let every species that looks upon humanity know what we are capable of when our existence is threatened. We did not start this war, but we finished it. Private First Class Kevin Murphy stood at the back of the formation, watching the ceremony with tired eyes. He was 26 years old, a Marine from Ohio, who had lost his entire family in the colonial massacre. He had fought across a dozen worlds during the war, earning medals and scars in equal measure. Beside him stood Sergeant Laura Bennett, a woman who had been his squad leader for 3 years. They had saved each other's lives more times than either could count. Was it worth it? Laura asked quietly. Kevin thought about his parents, who had worked in a factory on New Cascadia. He thought about his sister, who had been studying to become a doctor. He thought about his grandmother, who had taught him to fish in Lake Erie during summers on Earth, he thought. About the billions of humans who had died because a group of aliens had decided that humanity was too dangerous to live. No, he said finally, it was not worth it. Nothing could be worth what we lost. He looked at the human flag flying above the ruins of the enemy capital, but it was necessary. They gave us no choice. And now it is over. Laura nodded. Neither of them spoke again. The ceremony ended as the sun set overthrown. Human soldiers began the long work of occupation and reconstruction. The war that had consumed 7 years and countless lives was finally finished. In the decades that followed, humanity built a new order in the galaxy. They freed the species that the hegemony had enslaved. They established trade routes and alliances. They became the guarantors of peace, using the power they had gained to prevent others from suffering as they had suffered. The alien races of the galaxy learned a lesson that would never be forgotten. Humanity could be reasoned with, traded with, even befriended. They were curious and creative and capable of great kindness, but threatened their existence. And they would answer with fire and fury until nothing remained but dust and memory. Earth had spoken. The galaxy listened.